and that was a very important early partner. A lot of successful women who are role models have worked with us in several ways, whether it's Mrs. Bukuma Woshika, whether as part of this advocacy, Dr. Dunya Biola, MDC of Zaron Cosmetics, been a number of remarkable women. Because in the course of developing the program, we began to develop training women to develop entrepreneurial capacity in many ways. There's many of them who make soap, all kinds of detergents. The Soroptimists have been very, very important partners with us. Than Mrs. Asoluka, Neka Asoluka, and her colleagues in Soroptimists International of Surulere, I believe it is, have.
Nigeria, the biggest black nation in the world, ought to have a very strong economy capable of employing almost all employable citizens. Richly endowed with natural gas, petroleum, tin, iron ore, coal, limestone, arable land, and
clear and specific reasons. No society that leaves a significant number of its people behind can prosper in a sustainable manner. What the challenge of development really is a challenge of opportunities being open to all. And there can be demographic challenges to having opportunity open to all. And so certain parts of town that are quote unquote down the socio-economic ladder tend to get left behind. And because of this, we have been focused on Ajegunle for a very long time. Many years ago, I, as an individual, was involved in an Ajegunle project that took young people, provided them IT skills, and many escaped the neighborhood through that program. I know the British High Commission is particularly proud of one or two who, through placements in the British High Commission, continue to work even for the British High Commission till date, not just in Lagos, but in Abuja. And so this passion to work with the people of
When hyperacidity threatens to turn your stomach into a raging volcano, reach for Rulox. Rulox Antacid Anti-Flatulence Suspension contains effective ingredients to combat indigestion, heartburn, stomach gas caused by hyperacidity, giving you effective relief. Rulox Antacid Anti-Flatulence Suspension, effective relief against hyperacidity.
Made by SKG Pharma Limited. If symptoms persist after 3 days, consult your doctor.
Hello, good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for joining us this 21st in the series, the Nigeria History Series. We are going to be running full blast in a few minutes. We'll take 1 or 2 messages and ensure that all of our panelists are with us, and we will continue.
Part audio fades in and out. Maybe the tech people can look into that. Did you hear me? You are muted. Your microphone, Pat.
Oh, microphone muted.
I can hear you now. Audio comes in and goes out.
Okay. I think they are checking to be sure that everything is shape. It should all be set to go now. Yeah. Okay. So we'll go formally 2 minutes. Let me just confirm one more thing about one of our panelists.
Okay, so it's just going to play an ad right now.
Yeah.
When hyperacidity threatens to turn your stomach into a raging volcano, reach for Rulox. Rulox Antacid Anti-Flatulence Suspension contains effective ingredients to combat indigestion, heartburn, stomach gas caused by hyperacidity, giving you effective relief. Rulox Antacid Anti-Flatulence Suspension, effective relief against hyperacidity.
Made by SKG Pharma Limited. If symptoms persist after 3 days, consult your doctor.
Okay. Let me thank our panelists for the privilege of having them join us in this very important conversation. Let me welcome all of those who are joining us from around the world. Let me say a couple of things about why we have this series, and then I'll come back and introduce our panelists who have joined us, and then we'll start the conversation. Part of the challenge of development is having institutional memory. There are many times when organizations, countries, somehow, because of the way things are done, do not quite have institutional memory. And these can lead them to making certain mistakes again and again. And as all of us know, that means that they're going to be way down on the learning curve, and therefore their costs are going to be higher, therefore they're going to be less competitive compared to rivals. And so we thought that it was important, since our focus is to build up the next generation of leaders, whether this leadership be in areas of public policy, in academia, in the family, in the church, wherever it is. What our goal is at the Center for Values in Leadership is to help affect leaders so that we have values-driven leaders with commitment to the dignity of the human person who can lead in whatever aspect of human activity they are involved in, such that we have a better world. And so to help younger people ensure that they don't make the mistake that George Santayana warned us about, those who do not know history are likely to repeat his mistakes. We try and get people who have been involved in aspects of our country's life, in various sectors of the economy, and interrogate issues around earlier days of public choice. Why did we make these kinds of choices? What were the consequences? What could we do differently? What did we do well that we can learn from? Thankfully, there are things that we managed to do well. Just to take as an example, since we are in the oil and gas segment of this series, very often the example that is given of something we did get right, I think, is the model of the Nigeria LNG, the NLNG. So things do get done right. There are things that are not sometimes not done as well as they could be. So if we could learn from those, then perhaps tomorrow's people, drawing from that institutional memory, will make better choices and greater progress will come to our country. Now, since we started this, we've been through a number of sectors of national life. We just finished a series of manufacturing, which we thought was significant in helping articulate what should be a path forward for Nigeria, given that we must create a population, a thriving population, and manufacturing is one of those areas that we can do quite a bit of that. Before manufacturing, we were on healthcare. Being in the pandemic as we are, I think we had a total of 6 or 7 former health ministers, several subject area experts, and those conversations we thought were quite meaningful and useful. A good thing, by the way, is that all of these are available on YouTube. We can conversation around oil and gas to have some true leaders in that sector who participate from the earliest days of Nigeria's oil industry are with us today. I don't know that Izoma Philibas. Oh, Izoma is there. Yes, he's there. I can see Izoma. Chief PC Asiodo is literally the father, the technocrat father of the sector, from his work right from the Ministry of Mines and Power, as it was, through the beginning of the National Oil Company, all the way down. It's such an honor and a privilege for us to have him. Most people remember his famous presidential address as President of the Nigerian Economic Society, in which he truly captured the essence, the spirit, and the challenges of this sector. And we hope that today we'll get that kind of a rich conversation out of him. We have Dr. Imo Isueli. Dr. Isueli has an extraordinary location in the oil and gas section that he's been an executive from the perspective of a multinational oil company. He was chief executive of one many years back. He served as chairman of the board of Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, and he continues for many, many years now to run an indigenous oil prospecting exploration company. And so we're pleased to have Dr. Isueli with us. And we also have Dr. Herwe Demundia, who was one of those who worked in several parts of this industry through the NNPC and with very, very wholesome experience of the economics of the industry, particularly. Chief Donald Chiebet has just gotten out of hospital and is fairly significantly unable to carry a conversation at this point, but he will return. We're going to be in this series for the next, I think, about 7 episodes. He will return. The next one, by the way, is on gas, and we already have lined up people like Dr. Godswill Hetu and others who work in the gas area, the Nigeria LNG. The one after that, we'll probably have Donna Chebet, who's the former oil minister, join us. But let me begin with Izoma. Izoma, it's, when one thinks about Nigerian oil industry, of course, one just generally gets all the questions about the curse of oil and such perhaps negative perspectives. But clearly, the ascendancy of the Nigerian economy owes plenty to oil. Perhaps you can start us out in this conversation by just scoping the ambitions, the dreams, and the expectations when Nigeria became a significant oil producing country. And what do you think the challenges have been, and why the big and the hairy, audacious goals that oil held out for for Nigeria have not been quite lived? And then we'll take it going forward.
Yes. Good morning or good afternoon. You can hear me?
Yes.
It's unmuted.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, fine. Well, it's a very sad thing to discuss the oil industry in Nigeria. I mean, the title of your discussion this afternoon is a curse or a blessing, and many people seem. Pardon?
Yes. Okay, your video is off, but it doesn't matter. Your voice is more important.
My video is off?
It's not off. Yeah.
What do I do? Start video. Okay.
Yeah.
The video button. Yes.
Yes,
it's on now.
Back. You're back.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I can continue.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, what I was saying is that the title of your discussion this afternoon is curse or blessing. That's a great pity, because that should never have arisen, because as you know, oil exploration began in Nigeria just before the First World War. And it's a matter of historical interest that the first company to drill for oil off Lagos in Nigeria, and it was off Lagos, was the German-owned Nigerian Bitumen Company, which got a license for exploration in 1907. Of course, its activities stopped with the First World War. Because, of course, you know, Germany and Britain were on opposite sides. And in fact, by 1914 or so, the British then passed an ordinance, they control Nigeria, that no concession will be given in Nigeria or in any British territory to a non-British subject. So that put paid to the German bitumen company. And later on, in fact, the whole of Nigeria was given to Shell Darcy as its concession. The whole 343,000 square miles, including southern Cameroons. And if you exclude it, 323,000 square miles, or nearly 1,000 square kilometers, was given to Shell Darcy. That, of course, continued to reduce, and by I forgot the date now, but it reduced, and by around just before independence, they now got only 15,000 square kilometers on which they had got OML licenses. And later on, between 1960 and onwards, 66, the independent Nigerian government was able to give some concessions to Mobil, to what became Chevron. It was then, well, I can't remember now.
Gulf.
And then Gulf Oil, it was. Thank you. And people like Phillips, with whom Dr. Chevalier Sweli worked, and Tennessee and Co. A few of them, just 6. Now, but what makes me sad is that if you look at the 1970-74 plan, there was already the recognition by Nigerian government that oil was a wasting asset, and that what we needed to do, pardon? And what we needed to do was to use the resources to be generated by oil to transform Nigeria into a self-sustaining industrialized economy. That is, invest in those things. And in fact, considering what's happening today, it's a great shame, because the first republic, that is under Balewa, with Zik as ceremonial president, when oil had been discovered in Oloibiri in 1956, and exports began December 1957. And in fact, in the first year, to imagine, all we managed to do was about 2.5 million barrels, about 3. But of course, oil exploration continued. More oil was being discovered. And by the time the Civil War began, we were exporting about nearly 500,000 barrels a day. Of course, the Civil War, we had to impose, blockades and all that. And exports were only from the West, what Gulf had discovered in west of the Delta, about 100 and this thing. But as soon as the Civil War ended, things picked up. And by 1971 ending, we were doing 2 million barrels a day. We had become a major exporter. But again, in that plan of 1970-74, which said that oil was a wasting asset, first priority for development was given to modernizing agriculture and agro-allied industries. And the second priority was given to adding value to oil and gas. And you remember that even under Balewa, the first Port Harcourt refinery was commissioned, and we became nearly practically self-sufficient in oil products. So the nonsense or the scandal, the tragedy which has occurred of we importing oil products and all that, nobody could have imagined that. As a matter of fact, when we did, by the time we did the second plan, 1975 to 1980, oil had become very significant as a contributor on our national revenues. And we hoped we would get more from it. But even there again, we restated the fact that oil was a wasting asset, but that 75 to 80 plan was supposed to give us the infrastructure for self-sustaining industrialization, etc. And priorities were laid out. Projects were selected. And in that plan, we were now going to shift from assembly type industries, which we started with, to industries which were producing capital and intermediate goods. We talked about pulp and paper. We talked about cassava to glucose, etc. Hello, who is that? Projects were selected. Now, the tragedy of Nigeria is that after the 75 coup, the plan of 75 to 80 was abandoned. In fact, the discipline of planning was abandoned. Things were done just, without sufficient analysis and projections. And of course, the civil service with the institutional memory, the civil service which had, even under the military regime, got them in 70 to 74 plan to admit that the 5 basic objectives, just an egalitarian society, a strong economy. The 5th point was a just and democratic society. So the plans were really to create not what we have today. And unfortunately, the 1975-80 plan was rejected. Principle of planning was no longer sustained. I happened to go back to government after retirement from the civil service in 75. Part of the things they had to do, they had to settle score with the civil service they thought prevented some of them from becoming governors, etc. But that's by the way. But the point is that this cause of blessing, you remember that in economics, we have what we call the Dutch disease. The Dutch disease was when the Dutch people suddenly found gas and started spending the money carelessly. Of course, the Dutch are very sober people. They soon realized that they did stop it. But it had been quite clear that if you have a windfall and you misuse it, it leads you nowhere. So we were not being geniuses in Nigeria when we said oil was a wasting asset and we should invest in all those things. And you notice that in the 3rd plan, first priority was given to things like industrialization, manpower development. Second priority was given to infrastructure, electricity, so forth and so on. And it's really sad to me to see what has happened, because it isn't that Nigerians did not realize that oil will not be with us forever. And we had planned that even though oil will still be very important, by the turn of the century, if we continued growing at the rate we were doing after the Civil War of 11.75% per annum, and by middle 70s, we're already $1,500 per annum, GDP per capita. So you imagine if we sustained that growth rate for 10 more years, we would have exited poverty. We would be like the Asian tigers who were at par with us. So, and the tragedy is that then one happened to be brought into the sector again in the transition government when subsidies were becoming quite heavy and were going to lead to great corruption. But they are not taking the proportions of today or later.
Yeah.
We managed to negotiate.
I'd like to come back to you on that in a few minutes.
Okay.
But there's a very important area that you raised in that presidential address, which I want to address to Dr. Iswedi. And this has to do with the ownership and the indigenization of the industry. It started with a few multinational oil companies. One of the things that often is not, I tell a story when I teach about the role of OPEC, creating perhaps the greatest cartel in human history. And I often tell that story from perspective of a certain gentleman who was elected president of Venezuela, Romulo Betancourt. Betancourt, having been American trained and all of that, and holding up that he was going to fight communist insurgency in Latin America, but he wasn't getting enough money from crude oil. If he went to the Americans and as a friend, kind of called on them, he would pay more for crude oil and he would be able to then do X, Y, Z. Of course, the famous story is that Betancourt went to Washington, everybody welcomed him, he made great speeches, and they very nicely told him about supply and demand. And he returned to Caracas very unhappy, and literally one day jumped off the plane and flew to Baghdad in Iraq. And that was the beginning of OPEC. And OPEC is giving a lot of credit for, what happened with oil prices for us and everybody else. But one finds, reading Izoma's presidential address again, that Nigeria was actually ahead of OPEC in beginning to get greater participation in the multinational companies. Now you have worked in one of those multinational companies. You run an indigenous oil company. What went wrong in the process of Nigerianizing the industry in a way that we could have gotten greater benefit from the oil industry than we seem to have got?
Yeah, like
I think, thanks, Pat. I don't know if the right expression should be what went wrong. What did we not do? Continue to do is more like it. Izoma had given an excellent treatise on the backgrounds of planning, the economic and national planning issues. Now, the problem, both with the whole economy and the industry then is, did we follow through with those plans? And of course, the answer is we did not. Pre the 1980s, we had concessions given to indigenous players, such as, you had the likes of Dr. Femi Asheku and Co. You had Akin Olugbade. These are, Ado Ibrahim even had Nigerians in those days. Now, the environment was not sufficiently conducive. Funding was almost impossible, but it was not until late 1980s that we would have, when I came in, for example, and then got an assignment out of Philips for a small concession that was found not economic. Immediately after that, when Professor Jibril Aminu was minister, 11 concessions were given to other Nigerians who started producing. That was when you had people like Adenuga and Co. coming in. And of course, since that time, we've had a lot more playing, especially in the marginal fields. In those days, there was nothing like marginal fields. You were either commercial or not commercial. Commercial was if you're producing above 10,000 barrels a day. If you're not producing up to 10,000 barrels a day, you're not commercial. So you can imagine running a company that did a lot less than 10,000 barrels a day, more like 1,000 or even 500. You would not have the traction. So we did not have in place the effort and the attitudes that would have helped those indigenous companies grow to become the Shells or the Philips of this world. the thing that the North Sea did for British or UK indigenous companies, we didn't have that in place in Nigeria. But all of that is tied to our not following national plans. So it's not a question of doing something wrong, but it's a question of not following through whatever, in my opinion at least, plans we put in place. If we had followed the second and the third development plan, as Isoma Aseru just mentioned, you would have a lot less constraints, because when these indigenous companies come into play, you will find that the environment was sufficiently conducive. The ease of doing business from that time till now has not helped matters. It's an uphill battle setting up an indigenous company in this country right now, and it has not eased. We've had different changes in governments and policies, but these industries still require supporting the companies that cannot find sufficient economic wherewithal. And until we do that, it's going to be a struggle. For me, that's really it. The environment has not been appropriately set, and we have not followed whatever laws we have put in place. We have not followed through. We keep not following through, and that does not help matters. We need to see how we can come up with the appropriate rules, and many of them are in place, but follow through. Okay?
Yeah. You know what really sometimes really gets to me is when you think of the fact that, as I said, we are ahead of most of the Arab countries.
Yes.
OPEC, before the OPEC companies.
Yes.
In those times. And then suddenly we've got great national oil companies like Petronas popping out of Malaysia. Of course, Aramco rules the world literally. And we have not managed to see that happen with the NNPC. What could be the reason besides the failure of national planning, which is something I want to return to? And I keep thinking about this loss of discipline of planning, especially what went wrong when the adjustment program was being thought through, and people giving planning a bad name because of Soviet quote-unquote central planning. And then we made the mistake of assuming that planning is wrong, whereas companies plan. However, putting that aside for a minute, why did the Petronases of this world emerge significant national oil companies doing things around the world, and NNPC just became a permanent baby? If you speak to that a little bit, I would like to go to Idimudia, who walked through the NNPC years, to also give his perspective on why NNPC just kept crawling as our competition was growing around the world.
One question we should ask ourselves from the very beginning: how did we want NNPC to operate? Commercial or non-commercial, like a government entity, parastatal? I recall when I was being asked by the then president Babangida to join the government as coming in as NNPC chairman. My question was, what would you like in NNPC? A commercial venture or a government parastatal? And of course, he said he wanted a commercial venture. Now, NNPC has not been run, at least at that time, as a commercial venture. And I know that a number of previous ministers had looked at this. The government relies so much on NNPC. If we leave NNPC to run commercially, using the private sector tenets and parameters, I think you will have a different NNPC. But NNPC, to my mind, especially when I was there and the period before that time, I have not seen NNPC allowed to operate as a private sector entity. The companies, the other national oil companies you are mentioning, many of them, while still national oil companies, there's a lot of commercialness. You don't have to be a private sector company entity because being a national oil company, but you could run commercially. NNPC, as at that time, to the best of my knowledge, has not been allowed to run as a commercial entity.
That's
my view.
Okay.
You know, at the beginning, NNOC, that was the origin.
Yes.
We formed NNOC, and we said we would vest NNOC with concessions which were being surrendered, and that there will be no more private concessions. Because at that time, even, I don't know how far we've gone, expertise to explore and produce was not indigenous. And we thought that the NNOC with experts running not only what we would acquire from what came to be known as the IOCs, International Oil Companies, but also his own independent acreage. And that they would be in a better position to have the expertise to negotiate with authority and all that. Now, and then we, in setting up the NNOC, in fact, I made sure that the level 3 staff were earning more than permanent secretaries. We were going to emphasize their commerciality and all that. And we even had a petroleum advisory board where ministries of oil, finance, economic development, agriculture, trade, and central bank and Supreme Military Council had members and 2 independent people, because we thought oil would play such a significant role in our economy that you needed to consult all these people. Now, all that was destroyed in 1975. Not only that, the country now the government bought some false theory that in OPEC countries, there was no ministry of oil, that the national company combined both regulatory and commercial. That was never the intention originally. Because running, in fact, left to me too, the subsidiaries, the big subsidiaries which NNPC developed, should be on their own, and be running properly. We never did that because in 75, the intention was to, abandon, this trouble with Nigeria. When you take over everything before you
just cancel everything.
Now, not only that, in fact, it is some of the areas which had been prospected by NNOPC, which were handed over to some of these so-called new indigenous companies. But that haven't happened. There was no point going back. It was now how to make sure that they ran in the national interest and they ran seriously, acquiring enterprise. Government interference cannot, you don't overstress it, because who were the military interfering with? It's so-called experts who gave them some ideas, which, the military boys themselves couldn't tell you they were experts and all that. So we have to blame us amongst ourselves. And in fact, that my national address, presidential address, spoke about the poor intellectual context in which there was little contribution from the universities or anybody to analyzing and comparing. So the point is that the NNPC really, the second point is that even if government was running NNPC, but NNPC insisted on merit-driven recruitment and management. It is this rejection of merit, whether it's in NNPC or in the civil service, or even to see what we are suffering today. As Achebe said, you can't play in an international game with your fifth 11. You'll be defeated. So let me pause there.
Right. I was in fact going to ask, add just before the media comes in, a statement I've repeated many times. For Dr. John may be wondering why he said that to me. When I was researching a book in 1995 or thereabouts, I'd gone to interview Dr. Tom John. Dr. Thomas John had just finished serving as Group Managing Director of the NNPC. And I suggested to him, why don't we privatize the NNPC? We might get more out of it and all of that. And he very coyly said to me, what do you mean privatize NNPC? I said, privatize like a private company. He says, is it not privatized? I said, how? Ah, he thought it was privatized. And I knew he was up to some joke. He said, the NNPC was always privatized. The problem is that those who own it did not pay for it. Dr. Demudia, how do you analyze that from your experience? How did the NNPC escape the discipline of the success that led to the success of the Petronases of this world, the Petrobrases of this world?
Unmute.
You have to unmute yourself, please.
Unmute.
Unmute.
Okay.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now, yes.
Thank you very much. I was saying, really, if we look back at the comments made by the preceding two participants, my honorable minister and my chairman, that answer is probably right there. I suppose we should really start from the owner of the NNPC, the government, especially in a place like Nigeria, where the government determines all that happens and what is policy. Yes, the NNPC would have done better if it had been truly a commercial entity. I suppose that is really what Dr. John had at the back of his mind. But since it was not a commercial entity in the real sense, it could not perform like Petronas, Petrobras, and all other national oil companies that were allowed to behave as commercial entities. If you look at the saying, the owner dictates what exactly his organization should be like and what he should do. There is no doubt that the problem with the NNPC is that at no time was it expected to plan for the future generation of Nigerians. Whoever was in government, whoever was supervising the NNPC on the basis of government instructions, had at the back of his mind that resources and income generated from those resources are essentially supposed to take care of the problems of the present generation. We generally forget in Nigeria that resources in the country belong to all generations of Nigeria.
Absolutely.
And therefore, we do nothing to provide investments that will take care of all generations. We see those resources and potential investment only as income available to sort out current problems. At different stages and at various areas of participation in policy making in the NNPC, some of us raised the issue of what we call a fund of national patrimony. That is a fund that is generated today, percentage put aside, that will be invested to generate income at every other segment, so as to sustain when oil will no longer be available. Such investment, like people like Kuwait and the UAE did very clearly,
Okay.
and succeeded in keeping resources flowing and sustaining the nation. As a result, without that type of investment, we could not really muster adequate income to generate future income. The issue of planning is probably the greatest problem Nigeria has. The only basis on which we refuse to have a fund for the national patrimony is simply because we didn't care about future generations. We just assume this is our problem. Don't sort out our problem. We can't be bothered about other people. And these are Nigerians. They just haven't been born. Some were born, they were just young. And the moment the Bretton Woods institutions began to argue that, oh, why should we, nations all over the world, begin to plan? That is a victory for the Soviet Union at that time. Let's do everything to win them from socialism. Therefore, we must discourage planning. And sadly, policymakers in Nigeria were the first to follow that argument. And if you don't plan, almost invariably, you begin to fall on just the budgets, the shortest type of planning. Really no plan at all. Every ministry trying so hard to capture as much of the national resources and deploy on projects that are not necessarily integrated nationwide.
Talking about that and those projects and the failure of planning, I would like to look at petroleum sector projects. The point that you make about a national patrimony fund is something that I've spoken to several times. In fact, about 20 years ago, I was making a presentation, the then IMF country rep in Nigeria, all of them, I remember, were present. And I suggested that oil receipts should go into three different, if you will, heads of accounting. Part of it will agree what part of it will be able to go into the distributable pool fund, or the so-called FAC account. Another part of it, essentially, to be a stabilization fund invested in instruments that we could, if we had a shortfall, if oil prices crashed, we could draw from that stabilization fund to augment the budget process in the FAC account. And then a bigger part of all of this, because it is for all generations of Nigerians, should go into a future fund, the kind of Kuwaiti Investment Corporation kind of sovereign wealth fund. The Norwegians have done that. Even Botswana did it much more intelligently with diamond proceeds when it was perhaps the fastest growing economy in the world between 68 and 1980. But if you just left that aside and took on NNPC project itself, why were they monstrous failures? The investments to grow the oil sector, in my view at least, many of them, I mean, we're still dealing with the refineries that are a scandal, still trying to refurbish them. We had to get rid for nothing of the petrochemicals, all of those ideas that were part of the original national planning. What happened in NNPC that prevented the NNPC projects from becoming sustaining national assets?
Yeah, well, that is really the point I'm trying to make. It's an error to say what happened in the NNPC. what was the NNPC allowed to do by policymakers? What did government really want? It's good enough to build a refinery, but to maintain it, for turnaround maintenance, you must provide resources. You must budget. You must plan for over the number of years. So at least when the money is needed and required, is available, the NNPC then will be able to do a proper turnaround maintenance, will be able to maintain the refinery without mentioning any particular thing. I remember a certain stage when an unknown refinery company in Romania was brought in to do turnaround maintenance for the Port Harcourt refinery that had had no turnaround maintenance in about 6 years before then. So there had been dereliction, and even when it was now accepted, inadequate resources were provided. So the contractor could only go to probably one of the incompetent, because they will take any amount of money you pay, refineries in the world to come do turnaround maintenance in a place like Port Harcourt that we had really been dependent on. At one stage, the number of years were a little bit long. Under one, regime, you were able to build the Warri refinery. You were able to build Kaduna refinery. You were able to build the pipelines. You were able to build the depots. But what happened thereafter? A crop of military leaders and politicians succeeding each other, were able to take over policy that was unfaithful to national interest. Because there were people who were now concerned with budgets for their ministries, their different ministries, who were no longer concerned with planning for Nigeria, but were concerned with beefing up their different budgets. And with that type of attitude, whatever company was set up to run governmental interests could really not be successful, because they were merely told, you are doing this. Yes, you can be transparent and all that, but we are in charge. We make the decision. And on that basis, it became difficult for a place like the NNPC to truly be commercial. It was nearly impossible.
Apart, I think the issue is not what NNPC did or did not do. I think Dr. Demudia rightly points out it's an issue of policy or government. Izoma mentioned the issue, the malaise of Dutch disease. That's well known for natural, for those who are natural resources producers. This is an issue where overdependence in one particular natural resource ends up affecting the whole economy such that other areas are not doing well. Economists can go into details on that one. I'm not an economist. But one sure thing, one solution to avoid that, or two solutions. One would have been, you have to ensure that you don't overheat the economy. And what do I mean by that? That's the same point Dr. Demuda was talking about, the issue of sovereign wealth fund. You move funds so that you can use it to develop those other sectors that the oil industry or mining industry or natural resource industry is not supporting. The other one, of course, is what do you do? How do you plan? How do you diversify the economy? I believe it's a Spanish author, Miguel Cervantes, the author of Don Quixote, if you remember, those of you, he said, the gratification of wealth is not found in mere possession or in lavish expenditure, but in the wise application of that wealth. In Nigeria, We have spent foolishly and did not invest wisely. Now we are broke. Our problem had always been, what is the policy of government? What does government want? NNPC being owned by government meant that NNPC had to toe the government line. Whatever government told NNPC, NNPC had no choice. The government appoints the minister, of course, of petroleum. The government appoints the chairman of the board of NNPC. The government appoints the managing director of NNPC. Dr. Yemuda points out that the owner of NNPC is government. Very true. However, let's not forget, and I think Izoma Asodu can go into this more correctly and appropriately. NNPC was acquired as government by government in the interest of the average Nigerian, in trust at that time. For when Nigeria becomes much more mature, Nigerians become much more mature and they can take over. Am I being told that as at today, since that time, Nigeria has not matured, Nigerians have not matured enough for them to take over? Why has there been such objection, resistance, reluctance to commercializing and privatizing NNPC? Repeated government have refused to commercialize NNPC, even when they mouth the fact that they want to commercialize NNPC. The documentation and studies on how to commercialize NNPC is there, but never implemented. As I said, I came on board NNPC with that in the background. Within 3 months of coming on board, government hit back. No, they don't want to do it that way. That became a problem. Now, some of these problems we're now trying to address them through PIB. But then PIB for 20 years, Nigeria has been trying to change the oil industry. 20 years. I mean, why does it take that long? So the issue is there a will to commercialize? Is there a will to change things for the better? Until we have that will, and as long as one person, one entity owns NNPC and dictates, I cannot see how we can change this. It can be done via the stock exchange or whatever, provided we put in the appropriate guidelines so that the stocks are not cornered by a few. Yes, there are ways to do that. But the will, the political will to change the oil industry, I think is lacking. And there's nothing else that epitomizes this more than why it has taken us 20 years, and we still are not there yet.
We are not there. Well, I agree entirely with you, Dr. Swaley. That really is the problem. That if government, whoever is the policy maker, whoever is the owner, so to say, of the NNPC, decides that the NNPC will truly be commercialized, it will be run as a commercial entity, and the country will be the better for it. And it's like you said, see what has happened to PIB. You know, recently, in the last 1 year, when it came back again, everyone thought, oh, good God, it's going to be done now. But here we are, 1 year is gone, nothing has happened. What are the interests? Many believe in, at that level where people make decisions, many believe that I must be in competition with the state. The state cannot own all these. Where is mine? And because of that, they will not allow absolute commercialization of the NNPC.
I see Mr. Agule has been putting up his hand.
Subject.
Chairman, Mr. Agule has been putting up his hand. Mr. Agule.
Okay. Okay.
He's been putting up his hand.
Take his comment, but we normally have a segment where we then get into conversation and
it's
questions.
not a main speaker. Okay. But I was going to say two things.
It is not the main speaker. Okay, yes.
No, I was going to say that NNPC itself, what sort of people were recruited? Were they the most meritorious people to run those positions? Because when I went back briefly once,
go ahead.
The Kaduna refinery, it was one section of it, exploded. Luckily, not the whole refinery. And apparently, some of the people who were supposed to watch the temperature of the fractional, the column, and to stop it when it reached a certain temperature, were not quite literate. Who put them there? And you know the type of people who were at one time brought into NNPC. But that's one thing. That again can be traced to the government. Because if the government wants to run NPC properly, it will allow them to recruit and maintain the best. So coming back to this government issue, it's happened into every sector. In fact, before 75, when we were thinking about 75, 80, 85, 90 plans and all that, we thought NNPC would grow and all that. In fact, contribute more resources, be a more rounded company, but its contribution to the economy, to the revenue, would not be more than 30%. Nobody was happy, at least I was not happy, to start hearing about NNPC not only doing 70%, 80%, 90% even of foreign exchange earnings, when we had so many resources with comparative advantage, which could have been developed. It is this refusal to grow the country, is this excessive corruption, mindless, wicked corruption, whereby because you want to do $2 million, the country can lose 500 million. You don't care. Now, what do we do to address that? I had thought that if we could find from amongst the young people, young here, I mean 25 to 67. I don't mean I'm out of it, but I don't mean it's 25 to 67. Younger people, and how do we manage to persuade the present crop? Because politics has become a question of, I go there and I make money for myself immediately. It is not public service. It's not what we used to know, and how do we persuade some of these people that enough is enough? We can't continue. In fact, we're on the edge of violent disintegration into a Somali-like situation, which will be a great pity for Black people, apart from Nigerians. Now, can we manage to persuade these people to step aside and mentor and beg these younger ones to have a vision for 20, 25 years? One of my last failures in public service was as a so-called chief economic advisor. I couldn't persuade the president in 1999 to implement the Vision 2010. If he had agreed to do so, what we are talking will be different. Context will be different. Again, I was dragged in 2010 to help work out programs for Vision 2020. And we even had 3 so-called implementation stages, 2017 to 21, but before then, 2010 to 2013, 14, it's 5-year plans, 4-year plans. But we stressed that we must have continuity. What happened? As soon as the president was elected, substantially, or what do people call it anyway, in 2011, we didn't hear more about this 5th, it would have been 5th National Development Plan. We now started hearing of Jonathan Transformation Agenda. So tomorrow, if Okeke came, if Abdullahi came, we will have Abdullahi Transformation. How do we change this mindset? What can we do? Anyway, but it's a shame.
Actually, I was, it is, I was trying to frame the question. I mean, we all know the corruption.
What's happening?
Yes, me too. You're breaking up, Pat.
We can't hear you.
Pat, your audio. Your audio, Pat. The tech room, we cannot hear Dr. Thomas. The tech room.
I think he's controlling the tech room.
I can hear you somewhere, but I can't hear Pat.
Why is that so?
I think there's a problem with from the tech room on his side.
The platform is using.
Yes. Taiwo, you can hear me? Taiwo.
I hear you clearly. I hear you clearly.
And we hear you too.
Pat? Can you hear Pat?
No, not at all.
Okay, if you're in London, it's not here, and I'm here, and somebody's not hearing him, then it's not the three of us.
Are you hearing him?
No.
No, sir. My suspicion is that he's completely out.
He pressed something.
His team. Mr. Anuli, are you there? The CVL team, are they there?
Is he in CVL office?
Let's see. Can hear the CVL people. We're not hearing them. Their tech room should look into this. Because,
and they are the hosts.
They are the hosts, absolutely. We, the guests, can hear each other, but the host is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes. You've come back. Yes. You've come back.
It seems to have hit a technical patch.
It looks like.
Am I being heard now?
Yes,
we hear you clearly now. Clearly.
Yes.
Okay. Apologies for something. I was saying that clearly the subject we can track to state capture. And state capture, as defined, is systematic political corruption in which the apparatus of government basically is used in the main for the advance of the material interests, not of the common good of people, but of a few individuals who get hold of the Nigerian state. And I'm wondering, could there have been, but I call it legislative or ring fencing kinds of initiatives around an organization like the NNPC from early years that would have made this kind of state capture difficult? I'm in South Africa quite frequently. I serve on some South African company boards. The biggest obsession in South Africa for the last couple of years has been state capture because of an Indian family, the Guptas. And whenever they raise the issue and they get all worked up about it, I kind of laugh and say to them, if you are worried about the Guptas, come to Nigeria. And the whole place is captured. How can we create an NNPC, government institutions of any type that are insulated from state capture so that they can work in the interest of all of the Nigerian people and not, as Dr. John actually suggested, be owned by people who did not pay for it?
But to uncapture, you need to have the political will to uncapture.
I was kind of asking, were there things we could have done in the 1970s, in a national oil company to have insulated it from political processes the way the NNPC has become mad?
Well, you know that even they went as far in 1975 as to abolish the ministry.
Yes.
And that was not of the making of the military. It's somebody who told them so. You know, and that damage continued because even when ministry was now recreated, you know, some presidents insisted on being Minister of Petroleum, you know, and then appointed Minister of State to this thing. The idea of confusing both regulatory and the purely commercial, professional operations of NNPC endured. So I think it has to be an agreement when we can, at a proper audience, agree as a nation that we have failed in those approaches. And to move forward, there must be this clear demarcation. You know that we used to insist on 60% commanding heights of the economy. And because of this, for various proposals for LNG, starting from 1958 or so.
58.
58, yes, contributed, could not be realized until by accident with the transition committee under Shoneko. It became clear that if we insisted on having that majority, the minute you move away and a government comes with different ideas, it disbands the LNG board. It happened many times. And these are things which require 20 years sales contracts. So you start again. So painfully, one had to recommend, and it was accepted, that we should go down to 49%. Government still had 49% substantial holding. But what we had negotiated at that time was that IFC would hold 2% and later on sell it to private Nigerian investors and institutions. And that the international IOC would have 49%. So that if you are speaking in terms of ownership, the Nigerians plus the 49 of government is a majority. 51. But if you are thinking in terms of management professionally and profitably, the 2% private Nigerian interest will be with the government. I mean, will be with the IOCs.
With the operator.
With the operator. Now, later on, they managed to move the 2% to the IOCs, but the 49% was still substantial. And the LNG formula, people will agree, has worked. Government has this substantial interest. When it gets its profits and share of that, it will still be for the whole public. Now, again, we had negotiated in 1993. I think Engineer Bello from Kano was in NNPC as a group executive director. He coordinated that negotiation. We had agreed this refinery question, that Mobil should take over Port Harcourt, Total, Kaduna, and Finest, this thing, do technical and manpower and technical audits, manage it at international standards for about 18 months. And by 1995, we were to use the LNG formula in privatizing it. So that today, I mean, if I remember, Fort William, Texas, that's the biggest refinery complex in America. It started when? I think 1904 or so. So people talking rubbish that Port Harcourt is an old place, you don't, what do you call it, renovate it or renew it? I mean, it's nonsense. But yes, but the point is that when one left, the turnaround contract was then, that's left in 1993. Turnaround contract was given to the son of a certain person who had no clue. So this is the sort of rubbish. How do we get our people to respect merit and to understand that the success and continuity of a project is their legacy? Many of these people I see have consumed. I look to see what they consumed. I can't see. Maybe it's just in the stomach. But history books are not, the histories we read of great nations is not of people who consume like that. Is it not possible? And I'm sure, I'm glad to see one of our professors is here. They train these people in the universities. Of course, I can't blame them because it's what you get, you have to train. But all the same, how do we now move back? Because it wasn't always like this. As I said, 70-74 plan, 75-80 plan talked about the future, how to use oil resources to give us sustainable industrialization. In 73, we got Showman Engineering of Canada and Moto Columbus of Switzerland to do projections of Nigerian energy requirements to 2000 and identify thermal sites and hydro sites, what it will take to pipe oil or gas to the thermal stations, what it will take to connect them to the grid. All that was there. Many, many years passed. I've been asking. There is no copy of that report in the ministry supposed to be dealing with energy. What sort of thing is that? And later on, unfortunately for me, I was there when they started doing this privatization of electricity, of NEPA, as it was. Of course, this is very different. What happened was different from my idea. Well, nobody consulted me, even though I was the founding chairman of NEPA and I was chief economic advisor. They said they were doing emergency power. What was emergency power? You buy a second-hand electricity plant. Of course, second-hand has one price. And it's paid, you get your kickback or kick forward 100% immediately. If you ordered a brand new plant, which will give you at least 50 years performance, you only get 15% when you sign. Then when the assembly, maybe 40%, and then later on, the balance. This was too long a period for these people. Were they privatizing in the national interest? Whose interests were they privatizing? So this is the problem. How do we really now get a new set of people to realize this leads us nowhere, and that let us build for the future. And the future will guarantee that your children and grandchildren and my grandchildren will be okay.
Pat, can't hear you. Pat, can't hear you.
Okay, I'll mute here. All right. I was going to just take the question or comment from Nick Aguli and return, but just to set the frame for when I come back. The question of oil as a finite resource is, it's repeated often. We at the point talked a lot about peak oil, and we talked about peak oil for a season, and then now we get some real benchmarks. Total has said that it is discounting to zero 80 years from now all of its crude oil holdings in Canada, suggesting that in their scenario planning, 80 years from now, crude oil will be literally out of it in terms of the energy calculations of most countries. We need to reflect on what to do going forward realizing that perhaps our oil industry has, if we believe Total's arithmetic, 18 years to run. But let's take a question from Nick Agule and come back to this. Please unmute.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, you can hear me. Good afternoon, Prof.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, distinguished audience. It's really been great listening to you. My name is Nick Agule. I'm a Nigerian. I'm based in the United Kingdom. I live in London because I worked for Chevron and Shell in Nigeria, and then I came over to work for BP at their global headquarters here in London. And after 9 years, I have retired and I've set up my own consultancy practice. My question is to all the panelists. We have a problem in Nigeria. I read the report of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, and they stated urgent matters that Mr. President needed to attend to, which of course includes fuel subsidies, inflation, unemployment, all of the ills that bedevil us now. But I thought the most critical issue that Mr. President needed to give attention to was missing. And that issue is electricity. We have an economy that needs 200,000 megawatts of electricity. If we go by expert projections that you need 1,000 megawatts for 1 million people. So we have 200 million people. So 200,000 megawatts is what we carry Nigeria's economy. We are currently doing 4,000. How is it possible that an economy that needs 200,000 megawatts of electricity can fly with 4,000? It's impossible. I mean, if we want this economy to do well with 4,000 megawatts of electricity, we are as well saying that a pilot can fly a super jumbo aircraft with no fuel. And it's not possible because regardless of the competence, the experience, and the expertise of that pilot, it is simply impossible for them to take off that aircraft. And that is why we have recruited the world's most competent economists like Chief Asiodu. In recent times, we brought Okonjo-Iweala. Okonjo-Iweala is today managing the entire WTO for the whole world. We brought her for 7 years. She was our finance minister. She couldn't raise the economy. She couldn't. Why? Because this economy cannot take off with 4,000 megawatts of electricity. And here is the paradox. Nigeria is a country that is blessed with one of the world's richest deposits of gas. In my entire career in the oil industry, working for 3 of the 4 topmost multinationals in the world, I have visited nearly 40 countries. And there is no country that is flaring gas. Nigeria remains the only oil producing nation that is flaring gas. The same companies that are operating in Nigeria aren't flaring gas in other geographies where they are operating. I'll give you an example, Qatar, the nation of Qatar, where I have been severally. Qatar is generating 8,500 megawatts of electricity for 2.8 million people. 2.8 million. What's the I mean, Lagos is 15 million. So let's be looking for some village in Nigeria 8,500 megawatts of electricity. Nigeria, 200 million people, 4,000 megawatts. So why is why are we not declaring a disaster, an emergency in the power sector? Mr. President was told that COVID was dangerous to Nigerians. And he set up a presidential task force on COVID that meets every weekday and presents reports to the president very regularly. Why aren't we telling Mr. President that without power supply, this economy cannot fly so that he will...
Thank you very much. You are absolutely right. But let's maybe get some feedback quickly from the panel on this subject, and then we'll track it some other part. Isoma, you began to address the issue already in one of your last comments. Yes. I personally, I mean, if I write a book on what I think of what happened in the power sector, you know, many of us won't be able to speak, because I think that is, you know, it's more than crime against humanity. But please go ahead.
No, I have to unmute. Where am I?
You're okay, we can hear you.
You're okay, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes,
now,
yes.
Really, it's all very sad. I was beginning to tell you that we had projected power requirements. They wouldn't follow it. People were appointed, the managing directors of NEPA. We needed to invest at least $1 billion per annum, $1 billion in creating new capacity. But by the way, please, last speaker, you say we are generating 4,000 megawatts. When you say that, and the minister say it, the officials say it, I am very sorry to hear it, because you are telling people not to come here at all, because they wouldn't do any business. No, luckily, we are generating from NEPA, maybe 4,000 or 5, but from the private sector, luckily, we are doing 15 or 20, but that is at 6 times the cost of what it should be, which is why our industries in Inewi, Aba, Kano are not competitive. So the power sector is a national emergency, but it can only be addressed by people who are willing to allow our resources to be deployed optimally. I pray every day and night that, but they don't want our money to go into it. Oil prices, when we started talking about oil, well, $202, $2.40. When I negotiated and we got posted prices of $2.58 and managed to get back oil, buy back oil. Well, you people can understand that later. You know, at $3.25, the Minister of Finance gave a dinner in my honor. But, and when the government came to, this last democratic government came to power in 1999, I think oil prices were down to $14 or so.
Oh, they were single digits.
Pardon? Oh, yes, maybe. But within 3 or 4 years, it had climbed up to beyond 100, and at one time was 140. Now, all the money which accrued from that sudden windfall, can you explain where it is, how we spent it? So we have to go back again to this basic orientation. Whatever you acquire illegally, like, you know, but by sheer rapaciousness, you know,
we should have a special episode on power, because it is such a...
No, what I'm saying in short, what is happening to power is that we failed to do the investments we should do. In fact, by the time 99 came, again, 16 billion, they say, was invested. but invested in buying 30-year-old turbines, 10-year-old turbines, and all that. Not invested in, even though it was in my portfolio, I did go to the president and say, look, how long will it take? You've got all these second-hand turbines and all that. Papalanto, put them in Papalanto, Onitsha, Enugu, Sokoto, anywhere. How long will it take us to pipe fuel oil, if it's one requiring fuel oil, or gas? And how long will it take you to connect to the grid? You know, none of it was less than 3 years, which was more than enough time for us to have got brand new electricity plants. Now, what is it in the mind of the Nigerian decision maker that prevents him to appreciate this? He'll probably be there in power for 2 or 3 years. If he was a little patient, I'm not even talking about the kick back, kick forward business, but even the same quantum, you could end up giving us something which will last 50 years instead of 2 years. And so what was the result? There are some of those things still in the harbor. Because once you've got your settlement, whether it operates or not, it's not your business.
Okay.
So what have we got to do? The plans are there, and all it takes is for a determined government to say we will do A, B, C, D. And within 3 years, this economy will be booming, running again. And also, after leaving office, I was invited to 1 or 2 private companies. Some people wanted to do ethylene, polypropylene, and all that in Ibeku Leji there. The current president came and commissioned the plant. But that was since 2000. For 15 years, we couldn't get only 200 million cubic feet a day of gas. People were prepared to pay for the pipelines, pay the people who will install it. And if you cannot get after investment, I'm glad the Chevalier is here, Sweli. I don't know what you people insist on now, but in those days, I used to insist that if at the end of the day you can't get 15% return, nobody would take interest. So we can calculate these things and allow people, they are willing to pay, but we didn't. $4 billion US, which was meant for us, has been taken to Malaysia. There they found this thing. And this is just a little bit what has been happening. The attitude of ministers, civil servants in the ministries is completely negative towards investment, whether the investment is Nigerian or foreign. And when it is foreign, they have no time for us. After 1 or 2 years of go, come, they go. In the old days, before the Civil War, and even immediately after, even if when we started doing rapid expansion in textile industry, if you came within 4 weeks, it was Kaduna mainly, within 4 weeks, you would have seen the site and selected one, concluded the negotiation. An official will follow you to Lagos, and within 2 or 3 weeks, you would have got your pioneer certificate, the approved status and all that. Nobody is coming to invest his money and beg you to invest his money. So what we have to face now is, how do we get a new set of politicians, executives, mentor them, tutor them, plead with them, beg them, so that Nigeria can resume economic growth? We are so well endowed in all the natural resources. We have very few people who have basic matter, arable land, sea coast, oil and gas, coal, everything is here. But unfortunately, what we had dreamt that by 1999, at the latest, Nigeria would have done for the Black people what the Japanese did for yellow people following the Meiji Restoration. 1999 is past. 1925 is around the corner. What can we do with our children, grandchildren, to make sure that come 2050, would at least have delivered for the black man?
Thank you, Zoma. Just quickly, want to take a number of questions. Dr. Goswili Hetu is on and would like to make a point very quickly. Dr. Hetu was managing director of NLNG, old NNPC man too. Maybe he will tell us where the bodies are buried.
Yes. Can
Is he still with
hear
us?
me?
Can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
can hear you.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for this program. We are talking about history, and we're talking about whether oil has been a curse or a blessing. Well, I would say it's a combination of both, really. Not entirely a curse, neither is it entirely a blessing. Now, going back, and I'm happy that Uzoma is here. He knows where all the bodies are buried. I don't. But let me go to NNOC, which, as he said before, was supposed to be the vehicle for launching the indigenous participation in the oil industry. NNOC was incorporated in 1971 by decree. It didn't start operation till 1973. That's when people started being sent there. And between 1973 and 75, when Uzoma left as PAMSEC, there was a lot of disagreements going on between the ministry and NNOC itself. A lot of politics. Well, eventually, 1995, with Uzoma going, there was a completely different mindset. NNOC by then was restricted to exploration. Government restricted NNOC to exploration. Here's a brand new company, no expertise, no personnel, but they were restricted to exploration, not even production that they can, start with. However, even in that interim period, NNOC, with the meager resources, manpower resources, made about 4 or 5 discoveries. In fact, one of those discoveries has lately been put into production by Total, I think a Kike or so. Just an example of what could have been achieved if maybe NNOC was allowed to continue in its trajectory and given a free hand to operate. But then, as Uzoma said also, between 1975 and 77, there was a big campaign to make NNPC, so to make NNOC transition to NNPC with all the consolidation of all the activities in the petroleum sector within NNPC and the abolition of the ministry. That, I agree entirely with Uzoma, was a big mistake. Because even after the ministry was restored in 1985, 86, till today, the ministry has not been able to get its rhythm. We lost quite a bit of, shall I say, structure that the ministry had before then. So government interference has always been one of the biggest problems that we have. Islam also mentioned something about what he did when he came back in the interim government with reduction of NNPC equity in NLNG from 60% to 49% in 1993. In 1991, when I was MD of NLNG and Ahmed Joda was chairman, we were told that we could not, in fact, it's US Exim that told us that we cannot support the financing so long as government owns 60% of equity. So the chairman and I went to Chio Kongu, Minister of Petroleum, and we said to him, this is what we are hearing. We recommend that we reduce equity to 49%. In fact, I would even say we were laughed out of court. I mean, we were talking rubbish. We didn't know what we were doing. That was in 1991. It took another 2 or 3 years to realize that that was an impediment. And of course, the moment we became a minority shareholder and that company became a private company, the success was guaranteed. If you look at the history even of that period, we had from 1989 to 1993, we had 5 ministers of petroleum. 89 to 93, that's like 4 years. So how can you have any continuity? How can you have any shared vision? The managing directors between 1989 and 1993 were 4. That's managing directors of NNPC. So the lack of continuity due to government interference has been a major reason for the lack of growth of the Nigerian petroleum industry. I just wanted to make that brief comment.
Well, thank you very much. One of the things I'd like to find out is, who is this government? Government. Who is government? But let's take a message just for 30 seconds and come back and find out who is government. Not all of us consider that government. Who is that government? Yeah.
A good question from a 6 times presidential candidate.
What government were you going to head? After all, as a presidential candidate, you are going to lead a government. So what government were you going to lead?
Because this government is supposed to be all of us, but somehow we don't know. We have keep looking for it. Government.
What is happening?
The same way we are supposed to be shareholders of NNPC, all of us.
All of us.
That what?
I said the same way we are supposed to be shareholders of NNPC.
Who is the chairman now?
When hyperacidity threatens to
I
turn
think
your
the minister is most times the minister of state was asked, but the minister is
suspension contains effective ingredients to combat indigestion, heartburn, stomach gas caused by hyperacidity, giving you effective relief. Rolox Antacid Anti-Flatulence Suspension, effective relief against hyperacidity.
Made by SKG Pharma Limited. If symptoms persist after 3 days, consult your doctor.
Well, it is really the big challenge that we have, because this entity that's supposed to have concrete form called government seems to act on all our behalf for just a few people, and this is what the problem really is. Institution building in Nigeria is the challenge, and Isoma, without directly pointing to it, you make that point very, very well in that presidential address, the intellectual community did not have a hold on this. So they couldn't sustain rational public conversation that would pressure choice. The media did not understand what was going on. They could not sustain that. The various stakeholder groups and really institutions crystallized when interested parties, and I'm not quoting myself, I'm borrowing from Douglas North, who won a Nobel Prize in economics for the work he did in this area, engage, these interested parties engage, and ultimately boundaries are created. What has happened is that the various stakeholders either did not have the capacity or the interest in engaging, and state capture just whitewashed everybody. So NNPC belongs to nobody but the capture system. And that's unfortunately what I think has been the major challenge. How can we fix this? How do we build an institution that really works in the interest of the common good of all of Nigeria?
But you need to look at the running and the governance structure of NNPC. The question Izoma asked a minute ago, who is the chairman? When we look, if you want something to succeed, you set up proper governance structures. NNPC has a board, but is the governance structure, is the NNPC board currently as structured meant to create a viable entity like NNPC? You have a chairman and minister. How does that work? What is the responsibilities of the board of NNPC? Who approves contracts beyond a particular level? Who makes up the policy? I don't believe in the life of NNPC that we've had more than 3, perhaps 4 independent, non-government NNPC chairmen. I think I was the second or so, and they probably had 1 or 2 after me. But in all the life of NNPC, you have not set up a structure that will allow it operate in a particular manner to guarantee or ensure success. Therefore, back to the issue of capture. Yes, it is captured, not just captured in terms of decisions and instructions, but captured in terms of governance. So you have government, the minister, who most times in the recent past is the president, being chairman. Yes, they devolve and sometimes ask the Minister of State to act, but all of that means that the governance structure is not the kind that will operate in any private sector or commercial entity. Back to that issue of commercial viability. NNPC is not running in a commercial manner. Therefore, the governance structure is not meant to be profitable, is not meant to deliver to the shareholder who are supposed to be us all Nigerians, because government is holding the trust for us. The government, Asiodo asked for, Chief Asiodo asked for, so what are we to do? He himself knows very well as Chief Economic Advisor, the recommendations and documents of Vision 2010 at that time. If you go back to that document, you'll find that they are largely still effective today. They're still applicable. We are 10, 11 years past Vision 2010, and we have not even achieved the objectives we set ourselves for in 1999 towards 2010. As he himself said, Izoma Asiodo, he's supervised 2020. 2020 is past last year. We haven't achieved it. Yes, we are looking for the 2025. I mean, PIB was meant to solve all this. We're not going anywhere.
We keep looking at things that we didn't achieve. Who is to be accountable? How do we hold? We set goals.
Surely we're supposed to hold people accountable.
I will tell you something. You know, am I unmuted?
Yes,
can you hear me?
I hear you. We can hear you.
You know, I was a presidential candidate, or aspirant, as they say, in 1998. And one of those pushing the military complex, the military group, the one general came, asked me to step down. I said, why? He said, oh, just step down, it's only for 4 years. I said, no, I only came in because you're not discussing issues. Somebody said I was there before, I shall come again. Somebody was being backed by party structure, another party by this military complex, you know? And of course, there were 1 or 2 of us who were technocrats, who if the 2 parties, you know, eliminated themselves, they may then require people like us. That didn't happen. The military won. Now, but despite that, appeal to me, we organized for 3 nights, 4 days in Whispering Palms, somewhere near Badagry, where we worked out what each ministry should do for 4 years. It was a council, were about 37 people. 8 of them were either university vice chancellors or professors, you know. Then there were some ex-civil servants, there were some politicians, 1 or 2 trade unionists, quite representative. We worked out the caliber of people who should be ministers. And we agreed that, unlike the aberration when the Second Republic came, where we said we were doing American system, but then in America, you're proposed as Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs or for Treasury, specific jobs, and the Senate vets you as to your suitability for that job. You know what we did in 1979 was we put 40 names and say, clear them to be ministers. Then later on, so nobody was interviewed as to whether he could perform in a portfolio or not. Just 40 names of good Nigerians. Well, Nigerians, so, and then you now slot them in. So this time, we're recommending that before you appoint a minister, you call him some days before, give him this pamphlet on what his ministry was to do year for 4 years. Let him read it, come back, say, can he do it? Does he like it? Now, I regret to tell you that process was never followed, you know? So we ended up as before, 40 names, then you say this is minister and all that. Now, but when they now started, you know, I agreed and to be chief economic advisor with 3 sort of ministers of state in different sectors, fine, okay. But I now, because I was ex-presidential, what do you call it, aspirant?
Whatever.
Whatever they said,
Yes.
aspirant. So I was now automatically a member of board of trustees. So when we now had a meeting, I told them, well, you've all been elected, you're in government and all that, but we are not a political party. There is no political party in Nigeria which has worked out clearly its manifesto, not for this year, not for 4 years, but where Nigeria should be with a great proper vision, which he now canvasses and on which the party is elected. So, unfortunately, I had to go on an assignment abroad when the next meeting of the Board of Trustees met. When they met, they read the results of the special committee setup, and the number 1 and number 2 in the party were there. They said, this is opposition. Being asked to formulate clearly manifestos and ideas is opposition. And I'm afraid till today, the people who are participating and trying to get power have not articulated any proper vision of where they want Nigeria to be and what they will do to take us there. And if you are electing people who have not articulated that vision, now you can keep asking, who is government? The government is nowhere. It's nebulous.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed as a Nigerian when I see my minister get up. Any time he wants to say, according to President so and so, according to President. So there's no government policy, no party policy, It's all according to president, this president. So if the president wakes up with a dream tomorrow, according to president. So this is the thing. You are asking, what do we do?
Yeah.
What can we do now to, I don't know if you can do it. You can't do it by legislation. No, but by obliging all these seekers of power to tell us where they want to take the country to, and they canvass it so that we will now know when we're electing you. It's not just enough to say that. I was looking 2 or 3 days ago at the plans we used to do. In the detailed annex, you will see different projects state by state, whether it was to be done by government or were to encourage private sector to do it, costed and this thing. I say I'm going to create, wasn't it 100 million jobs? Huh? 100 million jobs.
Yes.
On what basis? Which projects? Where? What do you see? And you claim that this is campaigning. So can we do anything to address that issue? Those of you who are, we are yesterday's men. Those of you who are current, is it possible to as part of our processes now, that when you are being, before you can be registered at the party, you must have a clear enunciation of what the party stands for, where you want to take the country. This may knock out quite a few who are not ready to do that. And then we can have more manageable people to dialogue with. But then the question of asking, what is government, where is it going, would be a bit answered, because we would have known beforehand what they stand for and where they're going. I don't know what can be done, because they're already campaigning for 2023. I don't even know what is going to happen in 3 months' time. With all this burning of police stations and attacking the army, which said they had degraded the insurgents, you know, they're attacking them in their bases. What a shame. So yeah. I'm afraid, gentlemen, these ladies too, I see many ladies who have been quiet, don't know why. Yeah. But you say what?
A question from Ikechukwu Gege, and then we'll come back to the panel. Ikechukwu Gege.
Thank you,
Prof. Young people to ask questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes, right.
So
can't see you, but we can hear you.
I'm not in the oil sector, and I will deviate a bit from the oil sector. I will also come back to that in a bit, but I must commend this the opportunity to speak, and also this kind of platform to discuss on the issues of Nigeria. But to be honest, I must say, I'm one person that when it comes to the issues of Nigeria, I have given up on the issues of Nigeria, and I have a lot of friends who.
When are you traveling?
I'm actually not based in Nigeria.
Not in Nigeria.
I'm not based in Nigeria.
So you've already left. You've already left.
No, I'm not based in Nigeria. So
where are you?
The issues of Nigeria is it's really a disaster. And I love the question that Prof earlier, just shortly before the break, that he did pose to the panelists. He was saying, who is the government? I love that question. We are the government. The people of Nigeria are the government. And how we actually select our leaders comes to become a question here. For me, you know, I'm one person that is honest. You know, prior to the present administration coming in, I follow the proceedings and how we got to electing the crisis that we have today as a government, and how we tend to say that the previous administration led by Goodluck Jonathan was a disaster. I was really ashamed. To be honest, I've been saying this to people, and I'll continue to say it. The best ever administration that we've ever had in Nigeria had always been the Goodluck-led administration in Nigeria. All what he said to us, we must choose whether we are going back how many years behind or we're moving forward. All of those things that he mentioned are happening today. You can go and check all his quotations. You can go and check it.
Okay.
Everyone was practically against him, but that guy was the best that we've ever had.
Really?
And I was saying,
thank you very much. We're almost
That's a matter of opinion.
Some questions.
Yes, it's a private opinion. It's a private opinion. It's a private opinion based on analysis on what I saw and the policies.
No, that's fine. We just have to take others quickly. We're supposed to have closed already. So we'll just take 3 other questions in a row before any response.
But I still haven't. I was still trying to finish up my question.
Well, you had only 30 seconds because we're out of time already. If you can finish it in 5 seconds or whatever, so we can go to the next 2. So please, if you are finishing it, then Rhoda Aide and Chibweze Izumbo, get ready.
Maybe I should rather stop there so you can continue based on the way you guys have been attacking me.
All right.
But Prof, I must say, prior to that election, I had a huge respect for you. But after that, I was just not.
That's okay. We all have a right to our opinion, don't we? But it's a democracy. Rhoda Aide. Please unmute.
Still muted.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I want to appreciate our fathers for this historic presentation. My question is there any hope of a better future considering the foundational rot and lack of political will? Is there any hope for the oil industry in Nigeria?
All right. Thank you. Chibweze.
Thank you, Prof. And I must thank you for the good work you're doing constituting this discussion. My question is, what do you think is delaying the PIB bill? And again, do you think the PIB bill, as presently constituted, present a solution to the problem we are having in the industry? Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll start the responses coming from Dr. Taiwo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Let's start with the current question. My view is the bill is comprehensive enough, tries to address most of the issues that people have complained about in the oil and gas industry. And the reason there has been opposition is that some geographical segment in Nigeria is of the view that a lot of concession has been made to other segments, and politically, with respect to expected income they are not as favored as they've been over the years. I don't want to identify any of these locations, but following the public statements of many of the politicians and members of the House of Rep, as well as senators, it's easy to define what these views are. There will have to be more negotiation, give and take from all sides of the industry in Nigeria so that it is possible to take advantage of the advantages of the PIB. If we go back to the question of really what is the government? Who constitutes the government in Nigeria? I find it extremely difficult to identify because I have always believed that why is it not easy for Nigeria to raise politicians like Lee Kuan Yew? Why was it possible for the citizens of Singapore to say the nation has to be preferred to individual choices? Why was the leadership there able to get along with each other and say, what we are going to do is establish a government that one will give to every citizen the opportunity of access to merit. And when we have merit as a basis of choice, then you put a square peg in a square hole. Why must we put a round peg in a square hole? That appears to be the Nigerian way. The average Nigerian is absolutely at a position where he is easily manipulated by the political class. Why is the political class not the one that is not only independent, but prefers the interest of the nation to his personal interest? Why is it that I said earlier that the interest of other generations, the younger ones, the future, is of no consequence to the political leadership in Nigeria today? My view, quite simply, is that those who can have given up on political leadership because they say there are only rascals there, or those who have the muster of power, those who have the resources, those who have the power of threat and death are already there. So why join them? It may have to be that Nigerians who really want to get to leadership are only those who are in a position to forget the self-interest and say, this is how this nation can move. It is absolutely important we do that. And the average Nigerian himself must pull himself up the morass and decide that from now on, those who will call themselves leaders in this country are those who have true services to offer. Those who want to face the nation and lift the nation. It was possible for places like South Korea to do it. It was possible for Malaysia to do it. It was possible for Singapore to do it. There are people like that in Nigeria, but they have given up. Just let the rascals continue. and that is what will happen. There is nothing else we can do.
Thank you very much. Just before we go to Dr. Isweli and Izoma, let me just squeeze in 2 quick questions. Please, not more than 1 minute. Dr. Bello Saliu and Adedolakbo Akinrele.
Do I go first?
Ask questions, yes.
Prof, do I go first?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, distinguished panelists. I've told Professor Utomi I'm feel privileged to be here with the presence and quality of the panelists. This forum is about discussing the curse of oil. For most nations, it has been, for most oil producing countries, especially those dedicated to exporting that commodity, it has been a curse because we have, seriously, Nigeria is one of them, Mexico is another, you can count so many of Venezuela, Angola, all of them. You can count many of them. But I think what I want to contribute here is how do we, from now on, try to break that curse? One way we can do that is to ensure oil is on the way out. We all know that. Government policy has to start thinking of a Nigeria beyond oil. Every indices in the world is telling us oil in the way out as an important energy producing commodity. Maybe as a source of raw material, not now, but this is the mainstay of oil, in cheap energy. If oil is on the way out, for the many years we have been an oil producer, what have we domesticated in Nigeria? The very first time I sat across the table from Professor Utomi to discuss this issue, I was talking about the day we don't have any oil, most of what we'll be left with as a legacy for oil is going to be a wasted environment in the regions that produce this oil. Not many technologies involved in the production of oil today, from its exploration to the pump head, not to the forecourt. None of them, very, very little of them, is the domesticated Nigerian technology. If today there is no oil, this technology moves away. I schooled in Aberdeen at one point, and also in a few years, I was sitting and heading a desk. Part of my job is to ensure in Luanda, Angola, part of my job was to ensure that for every expert I bring to work in Angola, I have to build 2 Angolans that will replace him because in 2-3 years, they are not going to renew his visa. As we speak today, Nigeria is a dumping ground for a lot of people who, Nigeria is still a very veritable place for anybody to come and say he's an oil expert and make money. Nigerians are on the street looking for jobs. We still don't have a policy, dedicated policy. Thank God for Nigerian content. They have done what they could, but we need to go to Nigerian content 2.0. We are done with 1.0 now. We have to start linking innovation that will be domesticated in Nigeria, owned by Nigeria, patented by Nigeria, and will continue to generate revenue and income and expertise for Nigerians, even when oil is not there. Australia did it.
Important subject for us to discuss. Unfortunately, our time is out. I think this series will go on for another couple of weeks. So, Bello, I think we need to focus on one of those subjects and have you make more of a contribution.
No problem, Prof.
Okay. Ambassador Keshi is trying to make a quick one. Salvation and Libor, but we don't have time. We're supposed to have ended by now. So if we can make it only 1 minute, then we'll get Dr. Isweli and Izoma to close. Ambassador Keshi, okay. Nolakwo Akinrele was up first. Then Ambassador Keshi, 1 quick minute again. And then Salvation and Libor.
So who?
Okay, Ambassador Keshi, there's Charles Ayari also. Ambassador Keshi. Okay.
Then Charles.
And Charles Yari, then Akinrele.
Charles is on.
Charles is on. Okay, quick, just please, just 30 seconds.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. There's echo. Thank you very much for your support. What I take out of this is that we need to meet the Japan challenge for the yellow people. That our leaders do not have a destination statement, and therefore there's no roadmap. What I want us to do is that Pat Utomi has raised a lot of companies, Bank PHB, insurance company. Can Pat look at the 38 countries that are, 38 governments that are available now? Federal government, Abuja, and the 36 other government. He should choose one person, one of them, two or three of them, that he wants us together to work with to create a proof of concept in the next 12 months to demonstrate what governance is. Because otherwise, these guys, they have lost it completely. I mean, I heard the other day of someone saying that the central bank should pay for ransom. The central bank is not a piggy bank. So Pat, that's my challenge. Can you just find one or two or three people? But I'm sure we're going to swing behind that person and make it a proof of concept. It doesn't have to be from your state if your state doesn't agree. Choose 3 or 4 people that want the whole of the world to swing again behind. Otherwise, time is gone. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Mr. Keshi. You unmute yourself, please. We can still hear you. Okay, let's take, meanwhile, take the Lakwa really.
Thank you. Distinguished host and the distinguished panel, it's been very enjoyable. My point is there is clearly a governance problem arising from the curse of oil revenues. I believe that this leads to the fundamental question, which is the revenue allocation issue. If we had true fiscal federalism, then there would be proper allocation. We wouldn't have this over-centralized allocation of revenue and the attendant results, which is a lack of transparency, people arrogating, the host said state capture, which is clearly an offshoot of over-centralization of authority, and of which NNPC is a cardinal example. There is a very brilliant essay by one of the panelists, which I read when I was doing my book on oil and gas, Chief Asiodu. It's called The Political Economy of Fiscal Federation, in the essays on the political economy by Sankore in 1993. And it really lays down the problem we've had of fiscal federalism. 1970, 55% of derivation was with the states. That was eroded completely over time, right down to 3.5%, and now it is 13%. That really is the problem with the lack of transparency, the lack of governance that we're suffering, and we can, through lobbying our state representatives, our federal representatives, the House, to agitate for this law to be passed. This is not the PIB. Let us leave the PIB aside. That is a huge law which requires so much to pass it. But this is an issue which is existential and is affecting the Nigerian Federation as a fabric. The issue of fiscal federalism must be re-enshrined. We're not going back to something that didn't exist. We're going back to what it was in 1960, where it was over 55% derivation to the states. I'd like a comment from the panel, any of the panel on this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Keshi, are you ready? Salvation.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Thanks to the panel. Okay. I want to ask a question, seeing the panel members of the drivers of the economy in the past and the leaders of NNOC or NMPC. I wanted to ask, is NMPC still relevant in today's Nigeria? Okay, now look at it. Petroleum is a natural resource. So is gold, so is tin, copper, so is the human capital of Nigeria. And in my opinion, Nigeria's highest natural resource is the people. Okay, if you look what's happening offshore, you see that our human capital has been a very big resource for this country, but underdeveloped and untapped. If Nigeria would pay so much attention as to create a corporation to harness petroleum industry and do it and put in place an NPC, wouldn't there have been need for such a corporation to harness the human capital development? I don't, sorry about that. I think
Yeah. Salvation, your point is clear anyway, and it's a very good one. I see Dr. Bello Salihu there saying a good point. In fact, one of my many conversations with him from many years ago was the fact that I believe it's Egypt that produces some of the best underwater paid people in the world. And if Nigeria could invest in developing human capital, they would be exporting people like Egypt to go and do underwater painting in the oil industry. Big stream, just like the Philippines does for manning ship, crewing for the shipping lines, and so on. So that's a very simple point to make. Is Ambassador Keshi still able to make his point? If not, then we'll go to Dr. Isweli and close with
Thank you, Pat. We started this whole thing with oil costs or blessing. I don't subscribe to oil being a curse for us, despite the copious writing on the Dutch disease. I do not believe that a gift of God can ever be a curse. If the good Lord found it good for us to ensure that Nigeria had plenty of oil and gas, I would say that is a blessing. However, having said that, it is the use to which we put this blessing of God, the unwise application that determines whether we have turned it into a curse or blessing. We've spent the last 2.5 hours approximately talking about poor governance, lack of it, insufficiency, and so on, poor planning. So for me, it's the unwise application and governance and use of revenues from oil that turns into either a curse or a blessing. It's not the oil. It is we, the people, who have not done what we should do. And I think that is where the issue is. We have, as I said earlier on, we have spent foolishly, the revenues that is. We have not invested wisely. And I don't just mean the revenue only, but this also goes into the governance itself, integrity, and lack of use of merit in anything we have done, or most of things we have done in oil sector over the last, shall I say, 40 years. And that's why we're where we are. I think Rhoda Ide was one that asked, is there any hope? I would say there is hope. But to be able to capitalize and realize this hope, we need a paradigm shift. The way we think, we need to think about change it. Our concept of sacrifice, our concept of merit, our concept of equity needs to change. We now have a generation of younger Nigerians, as Chief Uzoma said earlier on. By younger Nigerians, I mean 25 to 40, 45-year-olds who were brought up in a slightly different environment. We are talking about those who came up, who were born after this Nigerian Civil War, those who were born after that period when Uzoma was talking about price of oil going from under $1 to $1.75 and $2-3. These Nigerians will not stand for what is going on today. Is there a solution, as Chibueze says? Yes, I believe there's a solution, but again, there must be a paradigm shift. Is the PIB sufficient? The PIB may or may not be sufficient, but I don't think we should look at it from that standpoint. We should look at it from the standpoint that it is a start. If we wait for a perfect solution to the problems of the oil industry, we'll never make progress. And I think it is the tinkering of the PIB over these years, supposedly to get a perfect solution, that has delayed it over and above the vested interest politics that's going on. I believe that an imperfect advancement in trying to improve how we run the oil industry is better than no advancement at all. And certainly, it's better than where we are now. There has been little or no investment in new production in the oil industry over the last 20 years. Yes, companies have been investing in keeping the place safe, keeping the industry safe and ticking along. But you know, the dollar, which is the language or the currency of the industry, does not wait for you and your PIB. Investments have moved out. And I believe Chief Aziode, for example, mentioned the Malaysian example of $4-5 billion or whatever it is. Money is moving out. The IOCs are not investing, and time is also running out for us. Vehicles are taking over. And somebody mentioned that one of the Scandinavian countries has given 18-year, Total has given an 18-year period for changing their whole concept of Canadian assets. It's not just Total. Increasingly, you are seeing the IOCs are investing in other sectors. And if we keep on the way we are going, we'll suddenly discover that we are holding on to assets, oil assets that have no use to us. So time is short, time is running out. If we do not engage in this paradigm shift, we will be nowhere at all. As I mentioned earlier on, the conclusions of 2010 are still applicable. We need to pass the PIB now, as imperfect as it may, or still operating on laws that are 50 years old. That's why there's no progress in the industry. We need to change. We need to wake up. Okay? That's my ending conclusion and answer to some of those questions that I can remember. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Uzoma, some closing words. Mute. Uzoma, you're muted. You're still muted.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah. Now
yes. Temporarily. Yes, but I frankly that we should not give up hope. Oil was not a curse. In fact, if we really use the resources properly, by now we would have so much progress. Agro-allied industries, adding value to gas, not importing products. Temporarily in 81, we were exporting products before they took us back to where we are, you know, and so on and so on. So it's a question of, again, how do we now try and get better governance? How do we address the question of who takes over power in this country and to what purpose? Once that is addressed, the ideas of how to run oil properly, how to set up companies and allow them to perform and all that, and how to look for competent people and anybody, when you challenge people, you'll be amazed how they become competent. So I don't want to tell you how.
Can hear audio.
Yeah.
who to appoint as MD, and whereas people are not even concerned with whether the company will run well or that, but more interested in very, very trivial politicking. It is how to get our people now reorientated and look for better governance. And many of these sectors will see great improvement. And I think we have reached the bottom. Everybody you talk to now is not very happy. Maybe we are about to change. And since some of you are still within the bracket, we hope that you do your best. But those of us who are yesterday's men are willing quietly to sit with those who emerge.
Lost voice again.
Lost the voice, yeah. Maybe it's
in 1958,
back internet.
January and February. Before I was supposed
to hear. We're losing a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's internet service.
Yes.
Okay, well, it looks like those on behalf of the group here.
It has come back.
Sorry.
No, please, go on. You're over time now.
Express.
So,
thanks.
This is the beginning of very important dialogue. Go on. I've lost you.
Okay. We're losing you, Isama.
Pardon? No, I'm giving up. I've surrendered to
we're losing you. We're not hearing all of what you're saying. Oh, Pat,
no,
Isama has surrendered to you.
I've finished.
He has finished. Pat, it is you, we're not hearing you
yes,
now.
Oh,
yes.
okay, all right. Thank you very much. You can hear me?
I can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Okay, lovely. But I want to express my thanks and the thanks of the team here at CVL to remarkable panel, Dr. Demudia, Dr. Isweli, and Isama PC Asiodu. The next generation cannot be grateful enough to you for helping, put some things in perspective. Because if it's not oil and gas, it will be something else, or we need to learn some lessons from how things went wrong in the past. Obviously, clearly, we started out fairly well from a number of the points that have been made today. Somewhere along the line, things went south, but it is possible that we can recover. And our hope is that the lessons that we draw from conversations like this will help very much. Rational public conversation, as the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas likes to say, is at the very base, at the roots of modernity and democracy. And I do hope that we learn lessons. One of the big challenges we have in Nigeria is a lot of young people who are very intolerant of the views of others, don't do enough to even just think, but they think that all they think is all that matters. Democracies don't grow like that. They grow from a marketplace of ideas where rational public conversation leads to a wealth of information that makes for a better choice. Thank you also very much. In 2 weeks from today, we'll have Dr. Ihe Kulu at Intervene today, along with several of our other high-powered panelists, Charles Osezwa, I guess possibly Bob Somoto, and some of those who have been engaged with gas in Nigeria look at that subject. I particularly like to close with a remark made by the late Chief Rashid Baramosi. He had led the Nigerian delegation to an OPEC meeting in 1998, I think, during the transition period, and when oil prices were down to single digits and everybody was fighting for quota. And the Indonesian oil minister was not paying any attention to the conversation, it seemed to him. And so at the tea break, he went to him to say, what's the problem? Don't you care to get a better quota? The Indonesian minister laughed and said, well, it's you Nigerians. You know, we depend more on gas, and there's no quota on it. And I recall very, clearly, Ibarmachi shouting "Pat" when he heard that, because he and I had had a series of conversations in which I had kept referring to that. Anyway, we look forward to having that conversation on gas next in a fortnight. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, special guests. Thank you all our participants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doctor.
So bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. Good to see you, Zoma. Taiwo, you're looking
Happy
good.
Sunday.
Good to see you.
Happy Sunday.
Very much.
Thank you.
Whatever is left, of Sunday.
Thank you.
Taiwo.
What happened to you? We're not hearing you.
Where have you been?
Well, I've been everywhere, sir, but quiet.
Huh? You're not hearing me?
I hear you clearly.
Okay, but you're in Nigeria. You're in
No,
Nigeria.
sir, I'm in the UK right now.
Okay. All right, Joe.
Thanks a million, sir.
Don't be an Andrew.
No, I won't. I won't at all.